Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to NFR. Of course, with the break in seasons between for SAFRL, channel has been a little bit quiet during the week. We're finally back. It's Thursday night. It's DRS. And of course, we are in Montreal, Canada. For a long time, it was the only circuit on the North American calendar since the US couldn't make a Grand Prix work. Now they've got three of them, soon to be four. Lots of drivers getting out there already. Three cars already out on track. Zero to cool. Will, Dan Rittveld, getting all the time they can on the tarmac. Sometimes a little bit of last minute preparation, last minute practice. Maybe getting home a little late. Didn't get a few laps in before the race. This is your opportunity. Some of the guys will use qualifying for a few extra laps of practice. Sigrid, J-Boy, Will, Nam Assassin, Quibus, all on outlaps, as is Zero to Cool, Shane. Rota remains in the pits. Dan Rittveld and Stoffel also out on track. Busy racetrack. Still no lap times. This is Will. I think this is one of the first drivers that's going to set a timed lap. So let's ride on board with the Aston Martin driver. Can get a feel for this Montreal circuit. Of course, named the Gilles Villeneuve circuit. Named after the, of course, Jacques Villeneuve's championship champion winner. Jacques Villeneuve's father, Gilles Villeneuve, was a fantastic driver in his day. He never went on to win a championship. Fortunately, his career was cut short. And this track has since been named after him. Bull gets a 1:11.1, and it's the first look we've had at a lap time this evening. So that will be the first benchmark we see. It's a secret. Will, Stoffel, Secret now goes to the top. It's in 11.0. Look at the lap times between Secret and Will, just a tenth of a second between the two. Stoffel in P3, Nam Assassin, that time slightly off. It's probably not a representative lap. That's the quickest we've seen, a 10.4. Make it a 10.444. That's Quibus. Goes up into P1. The two Aston Martins looking strong for the time being, P1 and 3. Got J-Boy also on a timed lap. He's coming to the end of that lap, goes through the chicane. Drivers don't get as close to the wall of champions as they once used to. Of course, that corner got its name on a weekend where several champions went on to hit that wall in the same weekend, whether it was practice or qualifying or the race. I think it took out the likes of Michael Schumacher, it took out the likes of Jacques Villeneuve, Mika Hakkinen, Damon Hill. All sorts of champions have met the demise of their Canadian Grand Prix in that wall, and when you're looking for every last inch of tarmac to make up as much time as possible. Sometimes you just flirt with that wall a little bit too much and it's the end of your race, no second chances. That corner is a little deeper these days than it used to be. Also back then it was pretty much a concrete wall. Of course now all sorts of Tech Pro barrier. You don't get those same sorts of crashes as we did in the 90s and early 2000s. Levy is now the fastest man on circuit. We saw Kurbis go over the line and set a 10.444, but now Levy has gone quicker. Thank you for that information, Marlies. Marlies telling me that there is 10 minutes until rain is coming. That might explain why these drivers were so desperate to get out there. We saw a very busy racetrack early on, and that means could have potentially rain in Q2. It's 10 minutes, don't know if it's going to affect this session too much. And of course remember the game can sometimes be pretty off on that prediction. How many times have the drivers heard rain coming in 15 minutes and then in approximately 10 minutes from that message you get another message saying rain in 15 minutes, and then it happens in the next 5. Some drivers already retiring from the session. Don't worry about those drivers, they're not having incidents on the circuit. Those are just drivers that are voluntarily retiring from the session. They're obviously happy with their lap time. Of course nobody's going to get eliminated in Q1, so everyone will go through. Of course we should lose the slowest 5 drivers. That would be in a situation where we had all 20, so nobody's going to fall out in Q1. So the drivers that are still out there, they'll be using it as a practice session. They'll be getting a last minute data in. Panda out on track, Dan Rietveld in the pits. This is the Haas driver. Haas, a team with a lot of exciting prospects just over the horizon. If some of these rumors do become true, Haas might just have a surprising future, quite a bright future. Of course Toyota looking to re-enter the sport, but rather than last time they entered as a manufacturer, they're looking to enter as just an engine manufacturer for the time being. It looks like we may have an exclusive deal with Haas. So of the top runners, only Panda remains in the session. We've got Namasas and Fuster, Dan Rietveld, all of them in the pits. So the only man out on track is the Haas. Oh, I see, Marlies, you're watching on Twitch as well. So tell me, are you watching on board? One or two people have asked about me streaming to other platforms. Twitch, Kick. I just think our largest audience is here. And most people already have access to YouTube. It is something we can look at in the future if we can figure out how to do a multi-stream. Only Fuster remains now in the session. Welcome to Liesel as well. If you're there in the comment section, remind me, everyone, who are you supporting tonight, so that I can make sure to give that driver some camera time. Sometimes what happens is I get too concentrated on a battle, or I get too concentrated on the leader. There's people in the comment section supporting a particular driver and they don't get to see much of that driver during the race. So of course, let me know who you're supporting. Try and keep an eye on that driver for you during the race, during the qualifying. And more of these is on board with Kurbis. It's quite an impressive setup you've got there. What are you running? You're running 2 monitors, you're running a TV and a laptop. What's going on there? It looks like a full-on F1 data center. Of course, I'm using 2 monitors, one to upload and one to monitor the stream. If anything goes wrong, I can see it happen. If I were to use this entire setup, things just get a little confusing. Of course, if I switched all the monitors on, there'd be 6 of them. But unfortunately, the game doesn't allow all this extra data. If it did, put all this data up on the screens, I'd have a plethora of information about the weather, about tires, individual laps and sectors. But unfortunately, the F1 game, as it has for about 5 or 6 years now, given us pretty much the same spectator mode. We don't get a lot of data, and sometimes we have to rely on you guys, or you ladies, in the comment section to give us some updates on the weather, because you usually know more than I do. Welcome to Ubuntu. Good to have you back. Thursday night, DRS. Of course, channel has been quiet. SAFRL, Tier 1, Tier 2, they take up 2 of our nights during the week. They are currently on a break in between seasons. And of course, we had the League v League going for 3 weeks in a row on a Tuesday night. So the channel went from very, very busy to feeling pretty quiet. We just got the race now on Thursday night. We'll be having another one on Sunday night for SKR. What I can tell you is that SAFRL will return to this channel. And as far as I know, League v League may be returning to this channel, but this time in a longer format than just the 3 rounds. And Marlies had the correct prediction there, rain in 10 minutes. Well, when she said that, was 11 minutes remaining in the session. I said I didn't think it would affect Q1 too much, but it would be in effect in Q2. And there is the confirmation. We have rain in the pit lane. Welcome, Shane. Good evening. Teammate from last season at JPR. Although we did win the Constructors, he could have done it on his own. It was a bit of a Max Verstappen 2023 situation. Of course, 13 drivers in the field. That would be That would be great, Ubuntu. I'm looking at starting it. It's just well, it's a lot of stuff, you know, and I'm trying to work it into how I'm going to do it. Is it going to be live? Is it going to be pre-recorded? At this time, I'm thinking it's going to have to be pre-recorded. We're already doing about 5 nights a week on this channel, so still looking at how I want to do it and how I want to format it. But of course, if you have any ideas, let me know and DM me. You can just basically on the poll there, just let me know in the comment section if you have any ideas. Of course, we are looking at starting something different for the channel, maybe a podcast that talks about a combination of what you're seeing here, all the various leagues on this channel, as well as some real motorsport news, primarily F1. Of course, we can touch on anything else that's happening that weekend. Maybe a podcast prior to an F1 weekend. Now we've got some drivers out on track, some already on a time lapse, some on out laps, some have chosen to stay in the safety of the pits. So everybody doing their own thing for now. Of course, the drivers will have an idea of what's going to happen here in qualifying. Is it going to dry up by the end of the session? Are we going to have a dry Q3 or an even wetter Q3? The drivers will have an idea. We don't know. We have to play it by ear, see what happens. No timed laps now, but of course these laps are going to be a lot slower than the laps we saw in Q1 with these conditions. Gonna have a look at the tyre screen, but almost certainly everyone is on an inter. And as I say that, I see Panda is on a soft, but he is in the pits, so I think he's going to change that to an intermediate before he leaves. Probably be watching the screens from the pit lane, and he'll see no evidence of soft tyres being any sort of an advantage, so he now switches on to the intermediate, and I'm sure he will be leaving the pits. I will get there. Ubuntu will get there. I just need to figure out where to fit it in. Of course, channel began in January, end of January, and it has grown pretty nicely, but I think it needs something else, something new, bring an even larger audience, and of course for the audience that we already have, just to reward them with more content, something different. So he worked at the A1GP back in the day. Of course, the A1GP, what a time that was. That was a very interesting series. Some will remember it as the World Cup of Motorsports. Of course, they ran Dallara chassis. All cars had an equal chassis. All cars ran the same motor, but instead of running a team of 2 cars, each team ran just the one car, and rather than it being a championship about the individuals, it was a championship about the teams, and each team represented one country. Of course, Team South Africa did get a victory or two in their time in A1 GP, And two venues landed up hosting the A1GP here in South Africa. Started off with Kyalami, ended off at a street track in Durban. Unfortunately for A1GP, it went the way of many ambitious open wheel series of the past. Simply didn't work out, ran out of funding, didn't get the necessary sponsorship. Motorsport on an international scale is, of course, very, very expensive. If you're not drawing the crowds, if you're not drawing the sponsors, sport isn't going to last very long. Of course, that's why F1 is as strong as it is. Abu Dhabi paying $70 million race fee per race. That is what these venues are willing to pay now for a Grand Prix. It's the difference with A1 and F1. No one was queuing up to pay that amount to host an A1 race. That's what makes F1 so different. Of course, the famous Shell logo on the Ferrari. It's been there for a very, very long time. Famously, that contract is worth $45 million a year for the little Shell logo. So that's a small example of the sort of money we're talking in this sport. And of course, Shell is not a title sponsor. It's one of the smaller ones. Of course, that's what 2026 is going to be all about, trying to bring these costs down. And in fact, the cost of manufacturing an engine will come down by 50%. We've got our first look at the lap times. Of course, these lap times have been set in tricky conditions. Some of the drivers will have gone out a little earlier, some of them would have gone out a little later. The track may have been in slightly better conditions right at the beginning of the session. So you might find the drivers that got their initial run done a little earlier, they're just going to be a little faster. So the times we have so far, or we have a time for everyone except Nam Assassin, he's retired from the session, so he'll take no further part. Shane leads the way, it's a 20.3, and then another 20.3 for Curvis, so absolutely nothing on it on the front row. We've got Will and Panda, 20.4, 20.6, then Stoffel, 20.7, same for Rota, then a 20.8 for Zero to Cool, 20.9 for Dan Ritfeld. So we've got 0.6 of a second covering your top 8. Or you can say 0.8 of a second covering your top 10. We've got a pair of 20.3s and we've got a pair of 20.4s. Absolutely insane how close these times are, especially how tricky these conditions can be. Of course, everybody is going to be slipping and sliding depending on what the race weather forecast is. These cars will probably be set up for the race rather than for qualifying, rather than for one lap pace. And of course, if we're having a dry race, these cars will be set up for the dry. They're not going to feel great in these conditions. Slipping, sliding, looking for traction. And somehow, at the end of a minute 23 odd, or a minute 20 odd, everybody is within, well, everyone in the top 10 is within a second of each other. Probably on all very different setups, on a very tricky race circuit. in tricky conditions. It's insane how close these drivers are. Still full. Fastest man on track at the moment. It's a 20.2. So my prediction of the drivers who went first might be able to hold on to their lap times if the track was in slightly better condition. That has proven to be false, because Stoffel set that lap time last and he went fastest. Of course, not a lot of risk in this session. If you're towards the top of the field, you should be feeling... Should I say that? I probably shouldn't say that. We've got the top 10 within a second. And then we've got P11 and 12 slightly out of position. They're in the 1 minute 23s. Now I wonder if those two cars, they just haven't put a decent lap time together. And when they do, if they join those 21s, well, really anybody could still take pole position. We don't know what's going to happen in Q3. We could have more of this, exactly the same, intermediate conditions. We could have worse, where the drivers have to go onto the blue wall tyre and conditions are going to get even worse. Or we could find a situation where clouds have cleared and we have a dry racetrack ahead of us. It's going to be an interesting Q3. Qualifying is far from over. And we still have absolutely no indication of what the order is going to look like at the start of this race. Right on board with one of the... Still trying to get used to this name. HP Scuderia Ferraris. HP Scuderia Ferrari. Of course, there was also another team on the grid with Scuderia in its name. That was obviously Scuderia Toro Rosso. That team has now had so many name changes. It's since lost a bit of its Italian identity. Shane returns to the pits, as does Kurbis returns to the pits. Let's go to 0-2 crew, currently in P4. Saw a few drivers come in without improving, and I wonder if the track's just getting worse and they don't really see a point of staying out there. Kurbis P3, but he's in the pits. Stoffel, Shane P1 and 2, they have retired from the session. 0-4 P4, he's out on track. Will also sitting in the safety of the pits. Not a lot of time to go, just 30 seconds. I think this man's desperately trying to get to the line to set another lap time, but he's not going to make it. Or he was either taking a shortcut or he missed the chicane. But nonetheless, it's not going to be able to improve. He left the circuit in a big way. Currently, as things stand, 2 eliminations. Going to be a Red Bull and a McLaren. Secret for Red Bull, Fuster for McLaren. There is Fuster. He's coming into the pits. There is Sigrid. Is this his final lap? Seems to be the case. His battery's almost dead. His fuel is flashing away there in the middle of your screen. That means the car is probably as light as it can be, running on absolute fumes. Almost no battery left to play with, leaving it right to the end. Can he find his way into the top 10? He's about to go over the line and give us an answer. Goes into the 21s, but does not go into the top 10. So eliminated from Q2. Secret for Red Bull, Fuster for McLaren. Secret got really close there at the end, but got into the 21s, but it wasn't enough. So Secret, Fuster eliminated from the session, as well as Nam Assassin. He retired without setting a lap. Then just to get through the top 10 really quickly, Stoffel took P1, Shane P2. Then we've got Quibus, Zero to Cool, Will, Panda, Lebby, Rota, Dan Ritfeld, and J-Boy. Well, we're back. I said, didn't know what to expect from Q3. Things could get worse, things could stay the same, things could get dry. Well, I don't know if they're getting worse or if they're staying the same, but they certainly aren't getting dry. Shane just notifying me that Panda, as well as himself, got 5 grid place penalties. So no one out on track yet in Q3. If anyone has any additional information in the comment section with regards to the weather, things staying exactly the same, will they get better, will they get worse? Well, I don't think they're getting better. We've got a very busy racetrack. I think if things were getting better, we would just see more drivers sit back and wait for the conditions to come to them. The current activity on circuit suggests something a little different. Zero to Cool wanting to stick out, so he's thrown on the soft while sitting in the pits. Now he's unmissable in the timing sheets. This is Will in the Aston Martin. One of 2 Aston Martins, both of them having set good laps in Q1 and Q2, looking strong for Q3. Looking at a possible front row lockout, that would be the ultimate start for the race later on. Controlling the front row in what can sometimes be a tricky first sequence of corners on lap 1. Will goes over the line to start his first timed lap of the evening. This is the sequence of corners I'm talking about. Pretty sharp left. Just a tricky pit lane exit. Sometimes it looks like you've gotten out ahead of your opponent, and no you haven't. What a slide there by Will, but what a catch. Absolutely. He had to pull that car back, could have lost it so easily. We saw the slide from the rear. He was just able to hold on to the car, and that's what you do when you drive in the rain. You have to adapt. Car's going to feel different, car's not going to feel ideal. They have switched from the inter to the wet, so that's confirmation that conditions are in fact worse. It means there's standing water on the track. Car's going to be slipping, it's going to be sliding, it's not what you're used to. And you have to drive that driving ability, that driving style to the conditions. That's what makes a race with rain so interesting. Somebody who's extremely quick in the dry and spends absolutely no time in the wet, all of a sudden you can really spot those drivers out. Will is about to go over the line and set the first time of Q3. It's a 21.6, so not much slower than what we saw in Q2 on the intermediate. J-Boy has gone over the line in P2, 23.0, so quite a difference there. Then Shane goes up into P1, waiting for a lap time from Quibus. He goes over the line just ahead of his teammate by a tenth of a second, a little less than a tenth of a second, 900ths of a second. Shane now joined on the front row by his teammates. We've got a Ferrari 1-2, Aston Martin 3-4. I said we might have an Aston Martin front row. Seems like I have underestimated the Ferrari team, and how can I underestimate that pair, Shane and Levy. What a team they've been so far this season, and when they both click, the rest of the field is going to have a handful with the Scarlet Red Ferraris. Giving the Aston Martins a little bit more grief, Stoffel now puts the also Ferrari powered Haas up into P3. So far looking like a Ferrari advantage. Not so much the case for the second Haas, down in P8 for Panda. Still looking to find his groove in these conditions. Looking to find something a little better. He's done enough to get through to Q3. Now he wants to put this car up on the front two rows of the grid for the race. Goes over the line, puts the car up into P6. You can see some of these drivers, they're doing something very different. It's not what you'd expect in qualifying. Of course, usually in qualifying, you throw on the softest compound you have available to you, you drain the car of fuel till it's on absolute fumes, and then you have a go. If you look at these drivers, you'll see their tyres, some of them say 2 laps next to them. That means drivers have filled up on extra fuel, and they're now doing multiple laps. So rather than just that 1 lap pace, get a few laps in here, and hopefully the times will come down as you go. Then maybe come in at the end, then they underfuel and have one last go. This is one of the 2 Ferraris, currently P2, Shane. Then Levy, his teammate, P3. Then the first of the 2 Aston Martins. This is Purvis. Of course, in 1994, back straight, you just saw Purvis drive up. Had a temporary chicane inserted into it. Wasn't a very pretty one. It was basically a tyre wall in the middle of the straight that you had to drive around. Of course, that was added in 1994 temporarily because of the death of Ayrton Senna. That was one of the circuits that was slightly modified. Another circuit that was modified, there was also a chicane added to Catalonia's main straight. If I'm not mistaken, the third track was Belgium. We've got a kink just before Radion. Of course, in 1995 the cars were deemed safer and those small changes were removed from the circuits, so they only ran for the 1994 season. I think we should all be happy about that, because they were, some of them, some pretty ugly rearrangements. The Aston Martins now falling down the field, and that's because of how tight this field is. And now look, drivers are doing lap times on intermediates, so these are now tricky conditions. This is in between. Look, Shane is still the fastest man in the session, and he did that on wets, but we've got the men in P2 and 3 on intermediates. That suggests the session could be coming back to the intermediate tyre. Anyone who set a lap on the wet, that might not be good enough. What's shocking about some of these lap times is we saw the 120s in Q2, that was on the intermediate tyre in better conditions than this. Now we're seeing drivers doing 120s on the wet. Surely the wet is supposed to be slower than the inter, but that just shows us we're right in the middle of conditions. Drivers don't know which tyre they're supposed to be on. Bit of a guessing game, bit of a roll of the dice. And if you get that roll of the dice right, in a session like this, you might find yourself way higher up the field than you expected to be. Welcome to Andre in the comment section. It's Great to have the familiar names coming back, showing their support. Always good to have you guys, and we've got a interesting qualifying session. As you saw, Q1 was a dry session, just the 13 drivers starting that session, so not much at play. Then in Q2, things got a little complicated. Drivers had to go onto the intermediates. It was an intermediate session from start to finish. And when we started Q3, it looked like wet conditions. Everybody went out on the wet tyre. Since then, it seems like things may have just eased up. Everybody has gone in for a set of intermediates. Now they're looking to do one final run. Welcome to Skull in the comment section. Good to have you here. Of course, looking forward to the return of SAFRL. These are our Monday and Wednesday night races. We're also looking forward to the possible return of the League V League series in a longer format. The 3-round series proved to be quite popular. Looking to make it a more staple feature on our channel. Shane around that final chicane, doesn't get too close to the Wall of Champions. You don't want to ever get too close to the Wall of Champions, but especially in these conditions. It's off into turn 1, turn 2. It's a tricky corner, you want to get around there as quickly as you can. Just feels like you're going a little bit slow, but that's how you have to do it. Into the chicane, we've seen a lot of cars get the entry to that chicane wrong. Just sliding on the way in. Shane looked pretty stable that time around. As I say that, he does get a slide. He's able to hold the car in a straight line. That would have been a little nerve-wracking just for a few moments. First few moments where you're not sure you're going to pull it back. The League V League has been confirmed today. And it is going to be a much larger staple on the channel. It's going to be 12 rounds in fact. So, of course, the return of League V League. Morley's asking, why does the driver get a penalty during qualifying? None of our drivers are in the pits to tell me, but I'm guessing that was not related to qualifying itself. It may be related to an incident that happened in the previous race. And then obviously, if that complaint goes against you, the stewards may hand you a 5 grid place penalty or what they deem fit. And then that will continue into the next race you participate in. So if you decide to skip a few races and come back after 3 rounds, well, you're going to serve your penalty then. That's as far as I understand it, unless they picked up some sort of in-game penalty that we did not see. I think that is the more likely, that they got up to something they weren't supposed to in the last round and picked up a penalty for it. Of course, if Shane and Panda are in the comment section, just give me some confirmation. Okay, so it wasn't related to the last race. Shane and Panda made contact in Q2. As a result, both got a 5 grid place penalty. So that means Shane, P1, quickest in the timesheets. Best case scenario, because after the penalty, he's going to be in P5. Panda in P8, so after the penalty he'll be starting from P10. That means Kerbis is going to be handed pole position. Stoffel gets a promotion onto the front row. J-Boy, Zero to Pool, Will, Rota, Panda, Dan Ritfeld and Levy, they've all completed the session. We'll now just await those official results, see if the game can work out these penalties for us so we're not reading out the wrong order. J-Boy in the Kicksalber, P4. So there are your top 10 results. Shane, P1, remember he's got that penalty, then Quibus P2, Stoffel P3, J-Boy P4, Zero to Cool P5, then we've got Will in P6, Rota P7, another man with a penalty, Panda in P8, so he'll be starting from P10, rather P12. Then we've got, I can't remember, it was Dan Ritfeld in P9 I think, and Levy making up the top 10. I hope I got that right. Of course, now we look at the empty pit lane. It's because all of the drivers are to the right. They are preparing their final setups, their final adjustments. What tire are you going to start on? What fuel load are you going to start on? Are you going to underfuel a little bit in anticipation of safety cars? That can be risky, but it can sometimes make the difference. I am back. Sorry about that. We just missed the start of the formation lap. This is one last opportunity for all the drivers. One last opportunity for all the drivers to get around the circuit, get some temperature into the tires, into the brakes. What you're really doing is preparing that car for turn one. Last thing you want into turn one is to be the only car in the field with cold tires. You're gonna get swamped into turn one, and even worse, on the exit of turn one. Quibus at the front of the field. Now this field is pretty spread out. Quibus hasn't really backed up the field in that final sector, so he might just have to sit in his grid box for a little longer than he would have wanted. Wait for the red lights. Here they come. There'll be 5 of them. Then there'll be none. And we'll be on our way. Quibus leads the way into turn 1. Stoffel challenges into turn 1, but he's going to have to do it around the outside, and he's done it. Outside of turn 1, inside of turn 2. Stoffel goes into the lead of the race. Quibus P2, now down into P3. So losing positions at the start of the race. The pole sitter, not the start he would have wanted. Shane already up into P4, so he's made up a few positions. Then J-Boy P5. Rota's actually just got past his teammates, so those Salvers trading places. Now Will up into P5, so one Aston Martin moving forward, one Aston Martin moving back. We've got Rota P6, Dan Ritfeld P7, then we've got Sigrid in P8, J-Boy. That Salber going backwards. I wonder if that Salber has some damage. Let's try and get a look at it. Yes, it does. That's more than an end plate. The entire left-hand side of that wing missing. And on any circuit, modern Formula 1 cars are very, very reliant on their aerodynamics. So the moment you break a major piece, that car becomes quite undrivable. And in any sort of competitive format, it's definitely undrivable. You might be able to get it around the race circuit, but it's not going to be very quick. Andre reporting a big spin from the Ferrari driver. Shane, currently now the second Ferrari driver, because Levy's got ahead of his teammate. So Shane had a big spin. He was making up positions at the start of the race, but now going backwards. It's lap 2 of 35. So a very, very long way to go in the race. So no need to let your head hang just yet if you've made a mistake. So much can happen. So much yet to be written. Could weather come back into this race? Play a pivotal part in the result. Could safety cars come into the race? Multiple safety cars, full safety cars, virtual safety cars, we don't know. And of course, one thing we haven't even spoken about is the potential of track limit penalties. Of course, you get 3 warnings, then you get a 3-second penalty. Then the entire thing repeats itself. Sometimes drivers can rack up quite a high number of penalties, 3, 6, 9, 12 and even more. And sometimes that means it looks like you're in the midfield and suddenly you're on the podium. It's not enough to just be quick. You need to stay within those lines, stay within those rules, otherwise you're just going to make your life so much more difficult. This is Will, currently in P4. Then his teammate up the road from him, 2.5 seconds up the road, holding on to the final podium spot in these early stages. He's just behind 0-2Cool. This is 0-2Cool and he's getting awfully close to the Haas, but that's not the place to make the overtake. That would take a lot of bravery. And at this point in the race, so early on, maybe a little stupidity. 0-2Cool happy to wait a little longer for a clearer opportunity, a safer opportunity, and one that's not going to take them both out of the race. I mentioned moments ago that could be a factor in the race. We hadn't seen any just yet, but there's the first one. Dan Ritfeldt, 3-second penalty. Of course, it's very, very early days. If you're picking those up already on lap 4, well, you've really got to slow that process down. Otherwise, by the end of things, you're going to be half a minute in the red. Haas from Williams, from a pair of Aston Martins. Those two, while not being the quickest on the night in qualifying, throughout Q1, Q2, Q3, they were right up there together in the top 5 throughout, looking strong. And now on race pace, it seems like they've been able to translate that qualifying pace into race pace. But Stoffel, 0-2Cool and Kurbis very close together on circuit. Just 0.8 of a second cover the 3 cars. Then we've got Will in P4. Unfortunately, he's just dropping back a little bit, not able to hold on to the podium sitters ahead of him. Just trying to get a better look at his front wing, make sure everything is where it should be. Does appear to have an intact wing, so that's not down to damage. I think that's just down to the top 3 being in a slightly different league of speed at this stage. Something that might give us a better explanation is the tyre screen. Well, that proved me wrong straight away. Thought we might see those top 3 on a set of soft tyres, and that's why they're pulling away from the field, but that is not the case. You don't have anybody on track on the soft tyre. Everyone in the top 6 going for that medium compound. Of course, Shane was higher up the field. He's had a spin and now he finds himself just behind his teammate. Those Ferraris running close together. They probably don't want to get too involved in each other's race, but they have to clear this Aston Martin of Will ahead of them, because those podium sitters are getting pretty far up the road with just 6 laps on the board. I wonder if the Aston Martin now is just holding the Ferraris up. Ferraris are going to be desperate to get past. This will obviously affect their race in a very negative way. The longer you spend behind the Aston Martin, it's the same Aston Martin that's losing time to the top 3. Means you're losing time to the top 3. So every single corner you cannot pass, the pressure builds up, the annoyance builds up. You've got to hold back, keep your calm, and at the very same time remember your teammate is in close proximity. Get too animated on circuit, you could take your teammate with you. Well, how's that for a pass? Not only does Levy get past, not only does the second Ferrari of Shane pull a double overtake, well, he goes on to overtake his teammate as well. And Shane immediately from P6 to P4 in one overtaking maneuver. And now he'll be hoping to concentrate on that 4.2 second gap up to the top 3. And looking to reel those drivers in. We were with the top 3 a while ago, we return to them now, and we see that Kurbis has just fallen off the top 2 slightly, 1.8 seconds adrift. Stoffel and Zero to Cool, the 2 men out front, trading positions. Kurbis just keeping a safe watch from a distance, if those 2 do happen to run into each other. Well, he's got a safe distance to avoid it. So it might just be the intelligent place to be while those 2 are battling. Ooh, we've got a Ferrari in the background going wide. Was that Shane? Was it Levy? Seems like Shane is the Ferrari in front, so that was Levy. Fortunately, he hasn't lost any positions on track. It seemed like that car did go to the grass briefly. Sometimes you're able to rejoin the track without much hassle. Other times, just one wheel on the grass, and that car will spit you right out. Give some of the drivers towards the rear some camera time. Rotor P7, this is secret. One of the 2 Red Bulls in P8, then Dan Ritfeld P9. Final points paying position currently going to Dan, the Mercedes driver. Then just outside the points, Fuster. Get in there. Nam Assassin, J-Boy, and Panda. Just having a frustrating evening. We'll be hoping for some magic in the pit window. Maybe a safety car, maybe some weather. Something that's just going to switch this up, so that he can switch his position on this timing sheet. Currently P15, he'd like to be a lot higher. His hopes for his second will go higher as he sees the yellow flag, and then they'll just drop away again as the yellow flag disappears. We know sometimes that yellow flag triggers a safety car a few moments later. But we have had no retirements. 15 drivers in the field. Of course, we started Q1 with 13 drivers, so another 2 have been able to squeeze in. No Get In There is one of those 2. I don't remember commentating on him all night. Can't really tell you who the other one is. May have been Dan. It was Dan and Get In There. I think those were the 2 drivers that squeezed into the race. Correct me if I'm wrong. Stoffel leads the way, 1.5 seconds. Then Zero to Cool. Those cars were running very close together, looking very aggressive, trading places. Now everybody just starting to spread out. It's only lap 9 of 35 and cars looking quite far apart from each other. 1.5 seconds for the lead, then a further 2 seconds to P3. The Ferraris, well, they're making up a lot of ground on the top 3. Will you look at that? Levy P4, Shane P5. So those Ferraris have switched positions again. This time Levy right on the back of Kurbis. Ferrari's coming into podium contention. And I need to stop muting myself. The Stoffel at the front, 0 to cool P2, Kurbis P3, then we've got the pair of Ferraris. They caught up with the top 3. That might explain it. How did I not pick that up? Comment section, I didn't pick that up. You didn't pick that up. Kurbis appears to be ghosting. And again, I've seen it before. For that particular driver, just all sorts of bad luck. Is that car in fact ghosting? Keep our eyes on that Aston Martin. He appeared to be ghosting a little bit earlier on. You can just give me confirmation if you know anything about that car. Maybe we just caught it at a bad moment, or maybe it was just a bad angle. But it looked to me for a moment that Aston Martin was in big trouble. Maybe it had damage. Didn't get to see it. Stoffel leads from 0 to cool. Levy and Shane now in P3 and 4, following each other through the field. Not getting too involved in each other's business. Of course, this is the much smarter strategy. Teammates assisting each other, maybe trading places, trading DRS, just towing each other around the circuit. And once you secure those Ferraris in P1, well, then you can start fighting amongst each other. For the time being, the goal has to be get both those Ferraris as high up the field as possible. So I don't think for the moment we're going to see too much battling between the two. Will P5 has been steadily losing pace throughout the race. Looked quick in the beginning. He's just been dropping back ever since. But of course, so long to go in this race. We saw the conditions in qualifying, how quickly things can change. Of course, the safety car changes everything. And one advantage Will does have that I haven't mentioned. He has no penalties next to his name at this time. If he's able to stay out of that penalties column, advantage Will. Further back, the other Aston Martin driver, that is Kurbis. That car is in fact ghosting. We'll keep our eyes on the Aston Martin. Hopefully Kurbis can regain control of that car as quickly as possible. Talking about regaining control of his car. Get in there. P15. While switching through the cars real quickly, we meet the Red Bull stationary, facing the wrong direction. Not the way you want to be spending your race evening. But get in there. Just carry on. I've said it before in the commentary session and I'll say it again. Probably multiple times because I repeat myself. One safety car changes everything. Caution flashes on the top left of our screen, but no evidence of anything more. It has since disappeared. Drivers at the front can breathe a sigh of relief. Drivers at the back, their hearts will drop. 3-second penalty for Dan, so lots of penalties already on our screen. Almost half the field now with a penalty next to their name. 7 of the 15 drivers in the penalties column. Almost looked like we were going to get a pit stop there, but none of that. Stoffel stays out. Still in P1, looking strong. Get in there, picks up a penalty. That's the man at the rear of the field. We saw him recovering earlier on. The car was stationary and facing the wrong direction. He's got a lot of work to do to get a points paying position out of this race. Drivers at the front, they'll be hoping things can just continue perfectly just like this according to script. Drivers at the back, they'll be hoping for something interesting to happen, something race changing. But will it come? Looking for DRS battles out on track, and there aren't many. We have this one, but I don't think we're going to see too much battling between these two Ferraris. I think their main goal is going to be to catch Stoffel up the road. If they manage to catch Stoffel up the road and pass Stoffel up the road, then we might see them interact. But they've chosen to split the strategy. Of course, both of them started on the same strategy. You can't be pitting on the same lap if your teammates are that close together. It's going to be a big disadvantage for the car behind, because he's going to double stack. Means he's basically going to have to park behind his teammate, wait for his teammate to finish his pit stop so that the crew can even think about starting on his car. Driver gets a big disadvantage, so that's why we've seen the Ferrari split. Shane's the first Ferrari into the pits. I'm almost certain we'll see his teammate respond on the very next lap. If he doesn't respond on the very next lap, he might find himself quite a way behind his teammate that he was once so close to. Of course, the undercut can be extremely strong depending on the conditions, depending on the race circuit. And if Levy does come into the pits on this lap, we'll soon find out what the undercut is worth. Of course, those Ferraris were very close together at the end of the last lap. Levy does react to his teammate. He comes into the pits. This is Shane. Coming up through that final chicane. Drivers just don't get as close to that wall of champions as they used to. That wall used to be so much closer. Where does that Ferrari come out? Well, there's your answer. Levy comes out behind Shane. Of course, Shane was behind Levy when he came into the pits. Gap was only about half a second. Levy has now come out 2.5 seconds behind Shane. And unless I'm reading that incorrectly, I think that undercut was worth 2 seconds. Of course, for anybody else on track that was paying attention to that, or they're listening to the stream in the background, that might give them some data as how they want to continue with their race. Seems like everyone who started on mediums has made the transition, with the exception of Panda. Panda's on a 14 lap old set of mediums. That suggests he made a very early pit stop because those mediums are out of sync with the rest of the drivers. He might do another lap or two on those mediums and then he'll be into the pits himself for a second pit stop. Shane sets the fastest lap of the race. That's the effect of the new hard tyres. Of course, you'd be thinking the faster lap should have come earlier on in the race then. If they were on mediums, that's the superior tyre. What happens is, yes, this is a slower tyre, but the cars are much lighter at this point. We're almost at halfway distance. These guys have dropped off a lot of kilos. The car will be feeling a lot better than it did at the start of the race, regardless of the harder compound. Some drivers choose to do it the other way around, start on the hard, finish on the better compound. Some drivers want the better compound at the start, so they can keep up with the leaders, or if they're looking to make up positions. And well, I mentioned it in the stream not so long ago. I said the drivers at the front, they would be hoping that the race continued on a perfect script, and the drivers at the rear would be hoping for something special. Well, the drivers at the rear are getting what they want. The drivers at the front, not so much. One thing this will ensure, for those of you who don't like safety cars, let me just tell you, of course, about the positives of a safety car. Everyone who hasn't had the start to the race they would have wanted, of course, they get a new opportunity. Of course, if they were very far off the rest of the field, as you can see there, Fuster and Panda, 20-second gap between Dan and Get In there, 35 seconds. When you've got a 35-second gap to your opponent in front of you with half a race to go, you realistically know you're not going to catch them. So when we get a safety car in the middle point of the race, just brings that whole field back together, makes everybody queue up once more. Drivers at the back get another opportunity. Drivers at the front, well, they've got to do it all over again. Got to get your head back into the game, get ready for the restart. You may have been leading by 2, 3, 4, maybe even 10 seconds for the entirety of the race, but all of that comfort goes away briefly at the restart. You've got to do it again. You know you could lose the lead into turn 1, and regardless of all the work you've done in the beginning of the race, it could all go away because of one bad braking point. Andre showing some support for Stoffel, saying he looks really good, just needs to keep the composure. I think that's the case for everybody there in the top 3. Everybody looking pretty good. Of course, when that first mistake comes, a second one tends to follow very quickly. That's what happens. You make a mistake, you get frustrated, try and make up for that mistake. Drive a little too aggressively, that second mistake happens, then the third, then the fourth, and things can quickly snowball. So if there is a mistake, you need to be able to maintain composure, keep your head, and not drive in anger. Usually that option doesn't work out for you. While we're on the safety car, if you're new to the channel, welcome to NFR. Of course, what we do here is we broadcast several South African F1 leagues. We do SAFRL, which is currently on a break. Of course, DRS, that's what you're watching tonight. We also do SKR on a Sunday. We usually have 4 opportunities to watch a stream during the week, and we're also going to be adding League v League to the channel on a more permanent basis. We'll make it 5 streams a week. I can tell you that League v League is one you definitely want to tune in for. There's the field here in DRS. Very capable one, very quick one, and as we saw in qualifying, very close one. You want good racing. Thursday night is the place to be. Safety car has disappeared, and now it's all onto Stoffel's shoulders. Gets the restart going, they go over the start finish line, and the safety car warning disappears. Now Stoffel, he's led this race and he's led it quite comfortably, but now he's going to have to do it all over again. 0.5 of a second is the gap. DRS not available immediately, they're going to have to wait at least 1 lap. Levy in P3. So the 2 Ferraris running close together. Kurbis, who was just dropping back, he gets a second opportunity at this race, so he'll be grateful to the safety car. Rota P5, then Will in P6. Dan Ritfeld P7, Secret P8, J-Boy P9, and Panda making up the top 10. We had the 2 retirements of Zero to Cool and Nam Assassin. And then that leaves us with 3 drivers outside the points. That's Fuster get in there, and Dan, and as I say the name Dan has triggered our second safety car. So while I was saying those drivers would have been grateful for the safety car, now they're just going to be frustrated by the safety car. They would have wanted to get on with it, start making up a few positions, get on with rebuilding their race. All this does is break up the momentum again, break up the composure and the concentration of the drivers out front. Dan immediately leaves the session. Just a friendly reminder to all of the drivers, whatever league you are in, of course, when you have a retirement, if possible, please stay in the lobby. We've had many examples, not only here on DRS, but on the other leagues we broadcast, where somebody leaves the lobby and it just triggers a domino effect of misfortune. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes even 3 drivers getting kicked from lobbies as a result of that one decision. So if it's possible to stay in the lobby for another 15 minutes and just wait for the race to come to an end, that would be much appreciated from all the drivers. I always say, imagine you were leading a race, somebody back in the field, you don't even know who, crashes, and as a result, you lose your race. You wouldn't like that very much, so I think everybody should just give the same amount of respect. So now we've lost Dan, we've lost Zero to Cool, we've lost Nam Assassin. Andre asking what happened to Zero to Cool. If I'm not mistaken, Zero to Cool triggered the first safety car and Dan triggered the second safety car. Or what triggered that first safety car? Did Nam Assassin? I think Nam Assassin triggered the safety car and then Zero to Cool DNF'd under that safety car. Of course, one of the weird glitches we've picked up on this game that I haven't seen in the other iterations of this game. Of course, sometimes we see glitches carrying over from one game to another, but one I've seen that's quite unique to this game. Sometimes you get thrown out of a lobby, and while trying to return to that lobby to reclaim your car, your AI decides to retire on your behalf. I've seen it on 3 different occasions, where before a driver can get back into the lobby, his AI simply pulls off to the side of the track and calls it a day. So if you are disconnected, try and get back in here as quickly as possible. Don't trust that AI with your car. The safety car warning begins to flash on the top left of our screens, and that usually means a race restart is imminent. We're about to get going again. Safety car will be in at the end of this lap. That means all the pressure falls back onto the shoulders of Stoffel. He's just finished having a restart, and it was a nice, successful, clean restart. And now just a few laps later, he's got to do it all over again. They're heading for that final chicane. There we go on the exit. He chooses when to go, and I think he's chosen to go as late as possible. Just keep Shane on his toes. Shane's got penalties next to his name, so he can't rely on taking the lead in the final lap. He needs to get by now, and he needs to open up a gap. So I think we're going to see aggressive driving from at least one of the two Ferraris. Levy in P2. He might be a little bit more patient than his teammate. Now so important for Stoffel to just maintain his pace, not let that overtake bug him too much. Just concentrate on the back of the Ferrari, make sure you stay as close to it as possible. Any sort of mistake from that Ferrari, make sure you capitalize. But while he's trying to attack the one Ferrari, he's trying desperately to defend from the other. And I think that is going to prove quite impossible. Thought that was going to be an insane pass up the inside from Levy, but Levy has chosen sanity. He tucked in behind Stoffel, thought it was going to be a very aggressive overtake, chose not to do it, but then by braking so hard and losing momentum, it's actually gone on to lose another position. We've got a solid caution for Sector 3. We've had a retirement of Dan Rietveld now, so 4 drivers down. Of course, if Dan Rietveld is listening in the background, please stay in the lobby for another 10 minutes or so, just so we can get to the end of this race. Last thing we want to see is another handful of drivers being kicked from the lobby. Now Stoffel goes purple in Sector 2. That means it's the quickest Sector 2 we've had in the entire race so far. So Stoffel, the man in P2, is definitely on the move. Might be P2 in the timing screens right now, or rather on the track right now, but in the timing screens, I believe he's very much in the lead. Let's have a look at the penalties, and there's some really rough penalties for some very important drivers. And most important of all at the moment, your leader, Shane, comfortable 1.6 second gap, but nowhere near leading this race. He has a 6 seconds worth of penalties next to his name, so winning it won't be enough. He's going to have to win it with some form of domination, and any sort of late safety car will guarantee that he's not going to be able to do that. Stoffel in P2 in a very, very strong position when you consider the car ahead of him has a 6 second penalty and the car just behind him has a 9 second penalty. He has no penalties next to his name. So as things stand, he's leading the race by a nice margin. Levy is currently P4 on the track, P2 in the timesheets. Difficult to keep track of at this stage. Another 3 seconds for Shane, so these are piling on now. 9 seconds for the leader. Those little penalties, Stoffel will be smiling. Car ahead of him, 9 seconds worth of penalties. Rota, the car behind him, also 9 seconds. And he sits between them safely. Just, what is that, 3 cars left on track with no penalties. The drivers are Panda, Will, and Stoffel. A Haas, an Aston Martin. Actually, the pair of Haas's and one Aston Martin. Keep on forgetting about the second Haas because Panda's had a real up and down night. He's been at the rear of the field, he's been at the in the middle of the field, he appears to be in the middle of the field again. And of course, if we get another safety car or 2 by the time this race ends, that could change all over again. Safety car may have given these drivers at the back a new opportunity, but it has seriously damaged the chances of the drivers at the front. Shane leads the way, 9 seconds worth of penalties. Levy in P2 with 3 seconds of his own. Then Rota in P3 with another 9 seconds. So penalties in this race are going to play a very big part in that final result. Stoffel picks up a penalty. That's the man in P4. He had no penalties next to his name, and I was saying that's the biggest advantage he has next to his name. He's now dropped 3 seconds of that advantage and becomes the latest driver in our penalties column to remain outside it. One of them is Panda, one of them is Will. Everybody else has visited the penalties column. We've got a caution flashing on our screen, and we hope that's all it's going to be, because we don't want a third safety car, not at this stage of the race. Maybe one at the end to shake things up, but for now, go away. Great driving. Stoffel, Will, J-Boy, Quibus, everybody pushing. Caution still flashing, it disappears. New fastest lap for Shane, that's the man at the front, 2.4 seconds in the lead, but that will be not too useful to him at this stage. He needs to make that gap a lot bigger. In fact, now Shane and Rota, the men in P1 and 2, they're both on 9 seconds. Lebby with 3 seconds, Stoffel with 3 seconds. If my calculations are correct, that would make, if the checkered flag were to fall at this very moment, I think the winner of the race would effectively be Will, man who's currently in P5. I think he could go on to win this race if things ended like this. So he will want to keep that column clear, hope for a late safety car, and that could potentially guarantee him a race win if he's able to stay out of the penalties column. Another man outside the penalties column is Panda, currently in P9. First in P10, but he is quite a ways away from the rest of the field. Plus he has 6 seconds next to his name. Said in the beginning of the race that we didn't talk about it much in qualifying. I forgot to bring it up. At the beginning of the race I said, don't forget about the penalties. Things that could mix up the race. First thing you think of is safety cars, maybe weather, but often we forget to mention penalties. When you've got a field with this many penalties, I can't even read you the results at the end of the race. I've got to wait for the official results, because the number of switches, the number of changes, it's simply impossible to work out at this stage. There's a lot of smoke. Seems like both cars locked up in exactly the same place. Happens sometimes when you're just following the driver in front of you so closely, you're so focused on them that sometimes they miss a braking point and you follow them. So rather than capitalizing on their mistake, you mirror their mistake. Shane out front. Doesn't have to worry too much about Rota behind him, because Rota has the same amount of penalties. The man he's worried about is his teammate. 3 seconds worth of penalties. Then Stoffel, also 3 seconds. But Will in a very strong position, because these drivers ahead of him, they're not necessarily getting away at a very quick rate. So while he might not win the race, I think a podium is very, very much on the cards for the Aston Martin driver. It hasn't really looked like he's had race-winning pace. But that's what it means to stay out of the penalties column. That's the advantage it can give you. It's the effects of racing on the limit. When you're already on your limit, but you see your opponent going faster than you, you need to do something different. You need to find some little extra centimeter of tarmac to utilize, and the drivers start using all of the track. They start pushing the limits of the white lines, and the next thing they know, They've got a record of numbers like that next to their name. 9 seconds, 3 seconds, 9 seconds, 3 seconds, 6 seconds, 6 seconds, 6 seconds, 3 seconds. Those are the penalties in the field. Insane amount of penalties amongst all of these drivers. Total of 45 seconds worth of penalties amongst these 10 drivers that remain in the race. Of course, we've also lost Get In There. So Get In There, Panda, Dan, Zero to Cool, and Nam Assassin have all fallen away in this race. DNF'd. We have a Ferrari 1-2. Shane leads from Levy. And now Rota breaks up that Tifosi party very, very quickly. Levy held P2 ever so briefly. Rota takes it back. Levy won't be too worried about Rota because of the 9 seconds worth of penalties next to his name. Want to make sure they don't add to those before the end of the race. Now Levy retakes his P2 away from the Salba. He'll be looking to hold on to it this time. But it's such a difficult task because you make the overtake, then you get a hairpin, and after the hairpin you're followed by another DRS zone. So you go from attack to full-on defense, back to attack. It all gets tiring. But fortunately for them all, it should soon be coming to an end. It's lap 32 of 35. When they go over the checkered flag, rather the start-finish line now, 33 of 35, so not long to go. Shane, who was looking to open up that gap as much as possible. Time is running out for him. He's got a 4-second advantage on his teammate. He would need a 6-second advantage on his teammate if he were to hold on to that position. 4.4, so it is going in the right direction, but he's going to have to do a lot of work on the last few laps, and those tyres are probably not in their very best condition. Usually we spend most of the stream focused on the tyre screen. This time we spent most of the stream focused on the penalty screen, because that seems to be the most important aspect of the race. Kurbis, fastest lap of the race. Very nicely done in the closing stages. Well, he came into the pits, put on a set of soft tyres to finish the race. So that'll explain the purple lap at the end of the race. Of course, fastest compounded tyre. Probably the lightest you're going to feel this car throughout the race. Rota picks up another penalty, and that has effectively killed his result. I think he was on 9. That'll put him on 12. 12 seconds worth of penalties for the Salba. Now that Salba has just ghosted. Briefly it ghosted, it's come back. I'm not sure what happened there. Rota not having a fun time of it as far as the penalties columns go. He's having a great time on the track. P2 on the track. But unfortunately, things aren't going to finish in this order. Another thing that's been quite different in this final stint was in that first stint, field really started to spread apart in the early stages. Looked like we might have a somewhat boring race really. Then we got the first safety car, brought the field together. Then we didn't get much of a race before the second safety car. It was about a lap or two, maybe less. And then after that second safety car, we've had this field stay relatively close together, with the exception of the leader. He's been pulling off into the distance quite nicely. Everybody else stayed relatively close together, and we've got DRS battles all over the circuit. We've got Rota in P4. It's followed by Wool. Panda further down the road, 7 seconds down the road, but he's doing a lot of defending of his own. He's defending P6 from Secret, from J-Boy. And as we say the name J-Boy, we see the Sauber going sideways, but able to hold on to the car. But that would have cost him a lot of momentum. He was a lot closer to Panda and Secret. You can see now 1.5 seconds adrift from those two. That's what makes it so difficult in this racing. You can get this entire race right. You can do everything right. And it just really takes one mistake. There may have been spectacular crashes tonight. We've had 5 DNFs, but we haven't really seen a spectacular crash. Not on camera anyway. Drivers are now going over the checkered flag. I'm not going to read any results. I'm going to wait for those official results to come up on our screens. When those official results come up on our screens, we'll know if my predictions from earlier were correct or not. I think it's almost safe to read them, but let's just wait for those final official results. Fuster goes into the final chicane for the final time. Over those grid spots for the final time, takes P9, gets a couple of points, and Quibus, well, he's going to pick up a couple of points too. Usually P10 is just the 1 point. If I'm not mistaken, he held on to that fastest lap, so gets the bonus point, and he'll be able to leave with 2 points. Panda gets the Driver of the Day award. And before I get copyright strike, let's just mute the game real quick. Let's read your results. Will takes the victory, and that's as a result of all the penalties and him just behaving himself. It's very nicely done for the Aston Martin. Then the pair of Ferraris, Shane almost did enough at the end to cancel out those penalties. He finished P2, Levy P3. Then we got Stoffel in P4, Panda, your driver of the day, in P5. Then Rota P6, J-Boy P7, Sigrid P8, Fuster P9, and Quibus makes up your points paying position as well as your finishing field. We had 5 retirements. Those retirements: Levy for Red Bull, Dan Ritfeld for Alpine, Dan for Mercedes, Zero to Cool for Williams, and Nam Assassin for the RB. Of course, top 3 drivers: Will, Shane, Levy, as well as driver of the day, Panda. If you would like to join the NFR cooldown room, you are welcome to do so. I will then bring you into the comms box. You can have a chat about your race. Of course, to the viewers at home, sometimes this is successful and we get all 4 drivers in here. Sometimes we get none, and I simply call an end to the stream. So I do ask for your patience. We'll just give it a minute or two, see if anybody does want to join, if anyone does want to have a chat, and we'll bring them in. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, I can hear you.
There we go. Are we missing one driver? We're missing one driver. Who are we missing? It's Levy.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with who do we start with? Let's start with driver of the day. Currently muted. Panda, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, what a race, I guess. I don't know. Wasn't a good race, but yeah, at least a top 5 finish, so can't really complain about that. Yeah.
Were you one of the drivers that stayed out of the penalties column? I think there was 2 at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have any penalties. I was close, but I didn't have any penalties. But unfortunately, I couldn't do anything with it. Obviously got a bit held up with fighting other drivers and so forth. So yeah, unlucky, but I guess that's just the way it goes.
Bit of an up and down race, but decent race. Still got a good handful of points. Then,
Yeah, no, definitely can't complain.
of course, over to the driver in P2. P1 on the track, P2 on the timesheets. 9 seconds worth, I believe. Wow, it was the Canadian layout. It's a tough one.
Yeah. Now, I said to Panda before the race, the penalties are going to catch me out here. And it did. So, yeah, but it was a good race. I enjoyed it. I actually was not paying attention to Will. I knew he was out, like he didn't have any penalties, but I wasn't paying attention to the time gap between us. And when I went over the line, I saw he's like 8 seconds behind me, which is
Were,
yeah.
were you listening to the stream in the background? Because
Yes, yeah.
I sort of made that prediction because I was looking at the times, and at one stage I said I think Will is gonna, and then I sort of stopped talking about it because I was like, nah, I don't know, my maths isn't. So when you went over the line, I was like, okay, I actually got that right, not bad.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
and then
well done to Will for keeping it clean.
the guy behind you, or the one that was challenging you for a long time, he landed up racking even more penalties than you did. Who was that? The one in the Sauber Rota. Yeah,
Rota, yeah.
he went up to 12, I think. So that effectively took him out of the race. And then
Yeah.
Will, are you there, Will?
Yes, yes.
Winner of the race, stayed out of the penalties. Were you correct me if I'm wrong, only the commentator I can see what the number is next to the penalty. Do you guys see the number, or do you just see the black and white flag? Do you know uh, how much penalties that opponent ahead of you has?
Yeah. Yeah, it shows on the game, it shows 9 seconds and 3 seconds and whatever the penalty is.
So were you looking at it and working it out in your head and thinking, wait, I'm leading this race, or couldn't you see Shane had the 9 seconds? Was that too far
Yeah,
ahead?
I could only see up until second place, and we had the from second to fourth, we had a fifth, sorry. We had quite a nice battle going the last, I think, 4 or 5 laps. So I was kind of hoping if I could just stay by them. I know I didn't have penalties, so I just didn't want to get too much involved in the racing just in case you get a penalty or someone clips you and you lose a wing or something like that. But yeah, just stayed there with the guys and yeah, just stayed out of trouble.
And then, of course, channel's been a bit quiet because of the one league on a break, and then tonight was DRS. Of course, returning to the channel, SAFRL, and of course, what do you guys think of the League v League? Apparently, that's been confirmed, and it's going to be 12 rounds. Are you guys going to be partaking in any way?
Yeah, hopefully if the pace picks up a little bit, pace was better than last weekend, but it's slowly starting to get more consistent. So yeah, if the pace is there, I'll definitely take part in league versus league. But we'll have to see the next couple of races if the pace has picked up that much.
What I'd like to do for the League v League, and then whoever's in the admin of the various leagues, they should just maybe for each, because I know not all the drivers representing a league are going to drive on the same night. So maybe if some of those drivers or one of those drivers at a time want to join in the comms box for a particular night, can have round whatever featuring Panda or featuring Shane or featuring wherever in the comms box. So if you guys want to
Yeah.
join in for the League v League, because the League v League, there's a lot to commentate on. That entire field is close, and yeah, it would probably help to have a second voice to fall on every now and then.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Good idea.
Yeah, let's chat about it.
thanks to you guys, I'm going to end the stream. So to everybody in the comment section, to everybody who left a like, thank you very much. And if it's your first visit, remember to subscribe. And live streams will be back on Sunday. So hopefully I'll see you all then. Cheers from me. Goodbye.
Like a gents,